Bob Eddy's recognition by the National Association of Chiefs of Police comes in response for his investigative work on the Birmingham bombing that killed 4 young girls in 1963. During the probe, more than 1,000 interviews were conducted along with many polygraph tests. The investigation led to persons in many other states. Chief Investigator Jack Shouse, who nominated Eddy for the award, says the bombing cases uncovered many other Klan-related crimes.
We uncovered several other incidents that happened. One, a flogging here in the state of Alabama recently. I'll let Bob tell you about that.
Well, we had while investigating the 16th Street church bombing, we had a flogging reported to us, and this particular flogging happened in a rural community in Alabama, and it was caused by association with a black and a white. They associated with one another, and that community didn't like that, and the Klan came in, or I don't know that the community didn't like it, the Klan didn't like it, and they came in and flogged them one night. So those things still happen in Alabama.
Shouse said the bombing case is far from being closed.
We were in Bismarck, North Dakota, Wednesday and Thursday of this past week, running polygraph tests on subjects concerning the bombings in Birmingham, Alabama. So it's really just hard to say. It's been going on a long time, and it'll continue.
Can we say years, maybe?
Well, we certainly hope not, but it could be years.
One of those interviewed in connection with the 1963 bombings was Gary Thomas Rowe, who was the subject of a grand jury investigation several weeks ago into the 1965 shooting death of Mrs. Viola Liuzzo in Lowndes County. So far, there's been no official report on what the jury reported in the case. Rowe is said to be living in Savannah, Georgia, waiting some word from the jury action. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Although it's hard to imagine a teenager contracting childhood diseases such as mumps, measles, or whooping cough, according to health officials, their chances are more likely than younger children. Before vaccines were developed, childhood diseases took a tremendous toll on life and health. Today, little is heard about children who are crippled or suffer some form of mental retardation resulting from measles or polio. Jim Russell of the State Immunization Program says our parents should check their children's health records to determine if they're properly immunized.
They would need to either check with the local health department if they got their child's shots there, or through their local, their private physician.
Are you running across any students who have just not been immunized at all?
Yes, I would imagine so, because in some cases we are giving injections of every vaccine we have to some of these students.
I understand that this is more or less the high-risk group because of the compulsory immunization laws.
Well, it's high risk in that we don't know how long it's been since these students have had these vaccines. There was no law requiring it when they were in the first grade. So, and this is where the, like you say, the high risk is where the diseases break out, like measles. Has been in the high school students in the past 2 springs.
Are the high school students the one to get the diseases first and then maybe transfer them to the smaller kids, or how does that work?
Yes, in many cases this happens. Those who have not had the vaccine will be exposed and then take it home to their little brother or little sister, and then it begins. Most of the time, these small ones have had their vaccine, but there are quite a few of the young ones who haven't had the vaccine also.
Immunizations are available to protect every child from dangerous childhood diseases, but they can't protect if they're not used. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Attorneys for the state of Alabama, led by Assistant Attorney General Larry Newman, charged that Johnny Harris pleaded guilty in 1971 to avoid the death penalty in 5 felony cases. Newman added after the death law was declared cruel and unusual by the United States Supreme Court, Harris started his attempts to change his guilty pleas. Harris's attorneys, Bill Allison and Eleanor Garber, charged the inmate's 1971 lawyers with being incompetent and of giving Harris misleading information and of generally being unprepared for trial, thus coercing Johnny Harris into pleading guilty.
Johnny Harris was not represented by effective assistance of counsel by his two attorneys, Milton Garrett and Louis Scholl, at those proceedings, and their lack of any serious preparation at all on his case had the effect of leaving Mr. Harris with no alternative but to plead guilty in 1971. Specifically, Attorney Scholl never went to see Mr. Harris during the entire 4 months that he represented him, while Mr. Harris was at all times in prison, incarcerated there. And Mr. Garrett, who had the job of interviewing his alibi witnesses and interviewed some of them, and found out that there was substantial agreement with Mr. Harris's alibi, went back and then told Mr. Harris that they didn't agree at all. And Mr. Scholl had absolutely no file, no area of work. He had only 6 or 7 pages in it. He didn't do any of the work on the case at all. And the work that Mr. Garrett did was almost, it had the effect that it was worthless. It just might as well not even have been done.
We believe that Johnny must now get a new trial on the 5 felony charges that he was arrested on in Birmingham in the summer of 1970. If he gets a new trial, he can prove his innocence on those charges. He will therefore not qualify for the death penalty that he now faces.
What do you think your chances are of bringing about a decision that would cause him to have new trials and, as you say, subsequent be found innocent?
Some court, whether it's the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals or the Alabama Supreme Court or some federal court, will have to rule on the basis of the record and on the basis of what Mr. Scholl and Mr. Garrett did not do.
There's no indication as to when the court will issue a ruling on what they heard from both sides in the Harris case. Meanwhile, Johnny Harris's stay of execution from the Alabama electric chair remains in limbo. And his attorneys have said today that if the court rules against them, they will go to a higher court. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, reporting.
Your founding fathers established a doctrine that called for separation of church and state. Your fathers and grandfathers have died all over the world to preserve that liberty. There is no place for local, state, or federal government in any shape, form, or fashion whatsoever meddling in the affairs of Christian education.
Now, because of some of these things and because of our dedication to the Christian principles upon which our nation was based, and I want you to remember that there were those who came forth on this continent in the beginning of our nation who were outcast and misfits in another world because they were sort of strange like those of us that are gathered here tonight. They just wanted to practice what their belief in God. They wanted to worship God according to the dictates of their own heart and according to their own soul. And it was a fight in this country to have the proper separation of church and state. And there were many of our forefathers in the beginning of our nation who stood and fought against those who would have said that we did not need that separation of church and state and the religious liberty that we have today. And I recognize that there are those who would like to take it away from us, but I want you to know that with our belief in God and our faith in Him and sticking together, those of us who believe alike, we have a vital force in this nation that cannot be overcome. Because somehow or another I believe, and I believe it to be taught in the Bible, that if people who believe in God will follow the kind of life that's laid down in the Bible, somehow or another the forces from without nor from within will be able to take from us the land that has provided us the opportunity to worship our God in freedom and liberty. Now,
I advocate that we now pass in the Congress a bill to reduce everyone's income tax over a 3-year span 33.33%. And what would that do? That means that the average working man and woman could catch up with inflation without requesting a raise, and allow business and individuals to adjust to a quietening down of inflation. At the same time, it would move up the economy, move it up so rapidly until there would be no excuse for any American, able-bodied, to be on a welfare roll. I think you ought to get them off the welfare roll and put them on a payroll so that they might work with honor and integrity.
Security is relatively tight around the Cullman County Courthouse. Extra local police and state troopers are assigned here. An expected 1 p.m. mass march by members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference did not materialize. It's expected will be next week before much of the preliminary jury proceedings are completed. So far, it's been learned that 26-year-old Tommy Lee Hines, Jr. has a mental age of 6 years and 4 months. That has been brought out so far in the limited testimony heard by an all-white Cullman County jury of 9 men and 3 women. Hines is charged with raping 3 women, but is on trial only for one, that of a white 21-year-old railroad clerk last February. He was arrested last May 23rd in connection with the 2 other cases of rape the same month. Hines' signed confession is being argued. A psychiatrist has testified that the accused could not have understood his rights when told those rights by police when he was arrested. Judge Jack Riley, who has denied motions for a mistrial and a change of venue, plans to hear testimony Saturday if necessary and will resume Monday after a Sunday recess if it's needed. A cloud of racial turmoil hangs over the Hines hearing. It's being heard in the city of Cullman because of racial problems in Hines' hometown of Decatur. The people who live in Cullman don't like the publicity its city is getting for something they say is the concern of another town 50 miles north of here. Since the trial can't be moved back to Decatur, the people of Cullman want the proceedings to end quickly so things can get back to normal as soon as possible. Reporting from Cullman County, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
At a news conference at the Capitol today, Jim Martin was asked about the effects of State Senator Dudley Perry, a Democrat, withdrawing his support of Martin. Martin said that he had not noticed any changes because of that withdrawal and had picked up some new support among other Democrats.
He's a fine man and a good friend, and I appreciate his brief support, and I think that over the long run, the Democrats for Martin is moving along very rapidly. We've had many people from Senator Allen's camp moving to the Democrats for Martin. A new chairman will soon be announced. I think we've got a lot of good support from Judge Heflin's group, who see me as a conservative, and my opponent is a liberal. So I feel a growing strength of Democrats for Martin, and I'm sorry Mr. Perry's not with me. He's a fine man, and I shall miss him, but we'll go right ahead and win this campaign.
When asked about the support the Heflin campaign was giving him, Martin said that that support was very good.
I think the Howell Heflin supporters are going to be great because they view me as the best of the two in my race, and I'm glad to have their support.
Martin went on to label his new opponent in the general elections, State Senator Donald Stewart, anti-business and pro-labor. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Yes, sir. Good to see you. Howdy.
I am for Judge Hunt because the problems we face in this country now are more important than any partisan politics or anything else. And he's has the same view that I think I have, a similar view, that when he's in office, he makes the office serve the people. He doesn't make any effort to serve himself.
And I have to use strong words here, that the kind of agreement what we have with the Soviets in the SALT agreement is treasonous. When you don't defend American cities against enemy attack, and that's what we agreed there, that we leave them open, while we have all the information that the Soviets are building up their defenses around their cities, I say that we can have an absolute security. We could have an ultimate weapon system based on laser. And by the way, I would recommend to put these weapon system on these platforms, on these sky power station platforms, because they are high up. The energy would be right away available there. And since you are high up, you could see from far away the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the satellites, even the low-flying cruise missiles, everything is in your sight. And I am saying that the system would never become obsolete, no matter how the Russians are improving their missiles, no matter how their plates thickness would vary, because my recommendation is that you should use a cluster of beams, and that many laser beams in the cluster, what is sufficient for the particular target to burn it out.
Colonel Neesmith stated to me this morning that as relates to doing away with Maxwell, closing down Maxwell, as relates to doing away with Ghana Air Force services out here, or doing away with Ghana Air Force services, in no way the Department of the Air Force has any plans to do away with Maxwell, to cut down on the civilian or military personnel, or cut down on the civilian and military personnel at Ghana Air Force Base. As a matter of fact, there's going to be an increase. And he also stated to me that this was after I received the letter, and I talked with him on the telephone, that any future plans for Maxwell, as far as transfers or cutbacks, increases, whatever the situation might be, is that the citizens of the Montgomery community and the surrounding area will be notified in advance, far in advance, through the Alabama Congressional Delegation, which I think is the appropriate channel to travel.
The main legal argument in this case is whether the Whitehurst family, during the trial of this case in October of 1976, should have been allowed to present the evidence they had to the jury that the pistol found beside the body of Bernard Whitehurst had been fired once, and that shot was fired by a Detective Cecil Humphrey after it was planted by the body and while it was taken from the scene of the shooting to police headquarters.
Is it your contention that this evidence was not allowed by the judge in the case?
This evidence was not allowed. As a matter of fact, we explained the evidence to the trial judge in his chambers, and initially the trial judge was going to let us present it and then changed his mind once we got out into the courtroom in the presence of the jury, and therefore the jury never had the benefit of the evidence that someone other than Bernard Whitehurst fired the gun that was planted by his body.
That is your contention. That is what is bringing the judges here to Montgomery for the appeal.
That's the primary legal issue, is whether we should have been allowed to present that evidence to the jury that heard the case in October of 1976.
The last price increase for milk granted by the State Dairy Commission was last June, when the price of $12.15 per hundredweight was set for Class 1 milk. The maximum price for a gallon of homogenized milk is now $2.15. There is no minimum price. Alabama milk producers say the increase is needed to cope with inflation and because Alabama has become a deficit state having to import milk.
And because of our per crop year last year, we're still feeling the effect of it on our feed prices. It's making it cost us so much to produce milk until the present price we're receiving does not leave us adequate return. And this is the short season of the year for milk production, unfortunately. That's the nature of a cow. And it's also the long season for consumption because schools are still just open. And our prices in Alabama are behind, at this time, the prices in surrounding states. And since we are a deficit state and have to bring in milk from surrounding areas to fill that void, the price we have to pay for milk plus transportation charges to Alabama makes the cost of the milk greater than our receiving price.
Producers support price increases in all classes of milk, including sales to schools. An increase in the price of Class 1 milk from $12.15 to $12.85 per hundredweight means that adjustments will have to be made to the distributors who sell milk in Alabama.
Most of the contracts, school contracts, have been bid for this school term. And if the price goes up that you must pay the producer for this portion of milk that goes to the school, we won't be able to increase the price to many of the schools because there were no escalator clauses in the contracts. So the distributor would just have to bear this additional cost. And the distributors in the state of Alabama is not in real good financial condition. It's been pointed out here today. Many of them have gone out of business and so forth. And it's my feeling that this would be a strictly undue burden to the process of the state.
The Dairy Commission has been asked to make any price adjustment ruling effective the first day of any work week. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The governor says that now that a lawsuit has been filed, that it will have to go through the due process of court, that it's out of his hands completely.
So he personally will have nothing else to do with it, the commission?
He will not have anything to do in that regard, and he also promised us that he would not reappoint these commission members when their terms expire. And most of the commission members who fired Warner Floyd, who voted to fire Warner Floyd, their terms expired January the 10th, 1979, and Governor Wallace promised us that he would not reappoint these commission members.
Did he say that he supported Warner Floyd?
He said he has always liked Warner Floyd. He's had a great deal of respect for Warner, and he feels that Warner has done a good job.
Did anyone ask that Milo Howard be taken off as commissioner?
No one asked that direct question.
15 months ago, Bird Dog Rogers resigned from his directorship of the Montgomery Zoo to take over a zoo in Little Rock, Arkansas. Robert Cooper took his place here. Now Cooper is again following Bird Dog's footsteps by taking over the Little Rock Zoo, where Rogers has resigned amid a heated controversy. Cooper says the repeated succession to Rogers' directorships is coincidental. The jobs are filled through merit system applications. Cooper says he doesn't anticipate any problem in taking over reins from a man who's twice resigned in heated circumstances.
The primary problems are communication, and it's just a case of finding out what's going on and getting everybody thinking the same things. And it's been no problem before, and it shouldn't be any afterwards. Anytime a new person comes in, it gives everybody kind of a new outlook, and they respond very well.
Did you encounter any type of problems when you came in here following the administration of Mr. Rogers?
Not really. There were some communication problems, which were easily straightened out, and everybody's talking to each other again, so it worked out real well.
As to the positions and zoo he's leaving here, Cooper has no complaints about them.
There's always room for improvement. It's a good zoo. It's a little zoo. It's well run. The staff here is just terrific. I can't say enough about the zoo staff. But it's just like any other part of the city. The city administration has its priorities.
Do you have any complaints concerning the priorities set for this zoo by the city administration?
No.
The Midland, Texas native has been working professionally with animals for 8 years. He says it's in his blood. The change of command could occur as early as November 1st. As to who will take over at the Montgomery Zoo, well, it's up to the best man who applies. The Parks and Recreation Board will soon begin advertising for those applicants. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
At the end of the past fiscal year, the Alabama Education Special Trust Fund was $7 million in the red. And the present education budget that the legislature passed is $6 million in the red, which means simply we're $13 million in the red at this time. The present budget also projects a 13.52% increase in Special Education Trust Fund revenues. If that should drop just 1%, say down to 12.52 growth, it'd be another $11 million short, or $24 million net. So I simply think it's time now to anticipate a possible proration. Hopefully it won't be necessary, but I feel in order that essential services and salaries can continue, that we must take immediate steps to cut back any expenditures that are not of absolute necessity, such as additional equipment, any materials not necessary. We double up on travel where we can and prepare for a possible proration next summer.
Do you expect any unexpected expenditures during the next fiscal year?
Well, no, not at this time. I cannot think of anything. The danger of proration, Janet, is that needed preventive maintenance, for example, on school buildings, school plants, goes undone. And as a result, it magnifies needed repairs later. So I'm calling a meeting next week of all superintendents and the two-year college presidents who are directly under me and State Board of Education, urging them to take the same steps I've taken, because it seems to me like it's not good business to anticipate a possible prorated budget and not do something about it early.
I'm saying to you that I've been about this district today in every city, in every county in this district, and I have not seen his footprints nor his presence at all. I challenge him to get out and to show the people justification for the things that he has done in office, some of which I want to bring to your attention in just a moment. If I may, some of the votes he's taken that I just believe fly in the face of the attitude of those of us who live in the 2nd Congressional District of Alabama. If you
It was against a background of Klan violence and civil rights demonstrations that Gary Thomas Rowe worked as an FBI Klan informant, a job he says he was doing on the night of March 25, 1965, while riding in a car with 3 Klansmen that Rowe says Collie Leroy Wilkins shot Mrs. Liuzzo to death on a Lowndes County highway. Rowe says he did his job by reporting the crime. Now he's being treated unfairly.
Now, I testified on behalf of the state of Alabama. They used my testimony at both trials, completely, for hours and hours upon hours of testimony I gave. Now, my question to the American people and to the Supreme Court Justice, because they're going to listen and they're going to have to hear it sooner or later, I'm afraid. If I were not given total and complete immunity by the state of Alabama, why was I not sitting over the table with the Klansman Wilkins and the Klansman Thomas. Why was I not charged with murder? I have never until today been arrested for murder. And I've never been arrested by the state of Alabama for murder. They used my testimony, and certainly my life was in jeopardy at that time. I feel if there's ever been a clear case of double jeopardy, this is it. They used me to gain convictions and then turn around and jeopardize me again by using the convicted people to testify against me. I've never heard of such a thing. Then we must remember, the Birmingham, Alabama Police Department comes up with 2 secret witnesses. This was a farce. Now, what concerns me, you ask me about why I don't want to return to Birmingham or why I don't want to return to Lowndes County. When I was there before, as a witness, it was a circus. I was treated like dirt. I could not believe in all my lifetime, you look over in the jury box and you see people with their feet propped up, drinking Cokes, sitting around BSing with each other while I'm testifying.
Rowe is free in Savannah, Georgia on $5,000 bond in the case and says he will fight extradition until every means is exhausted. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
And it was simply, as soon as we get this joke over with, I'll be home. It was just a farce. It was a
Sorry, but we do not have time for the last 3 items. As time allows, here's tonight's nightly news planning, which will include
charges. Dr. James Schoenberger is one of those past presidents. Now that the debate has gone public, he says Dr. Mann's recommendations are false and misleading.
I don't think he has different evidence. I think he has ignored all of the evidence which there is and has picked only that which serves his purposes. And what his purposes may be, I can't say.
Clogged arteries can wind up here on the operating table. And despite this week's announcement, most researchers are